Incident 1. The Wrong Door. It was 2:47 in the morning when the knocking started. Not loud, not frantic, just steady. 3 knocks, a pause, then 3 more. I had been living alone in my apartment for about 8 months at that point, 3rd floor, corner unit. The building was older, maybe built in the late 70s, and the hallways had this dull yellow lighting that made everything look slightly wrong even in the middle of the day. At night, it was worse. I remember lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking it was probably a drunk neighbor who had the wrong floor. That happens. You tell yourself the most reasonable thing first. It's almost like a reflex. Your brain reaches for the boring explanation before it lets the other thought in. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. I checked my phone. No missed calls, no texts. I have 2 close friends in the city, and neither of them would show up at 2 a.m. without a message. I have no family nearby, so I got up. I didn't turn on the living room light. I'm not sure why. I just walked slowly toward the front door in the dark and looked through the peephole. A woman was standing in the hallway. She was facing my door directly, which is the first thing that felt strange. When someone knocks and waits, they usually turn slightly. They shift their weight. They look down at their phone or glance toward the elevator. This woman was just standing there, still, facing the door like she was looking at something on the surface of it. She looked like she was in her mid-40s, dark hair, slightly disheveled. She was wearing a long cardigan over what looked like pajama pants, no shoes. She knocked again, same rhythm, calm, patient. I didn't say anything. I just watched through the peephole. And then she said, in a completely flat voice, "I know you can see me." I stepped back from the door. My heart was going. I told myself maybe she was a sleepwalker. Maybe she was having some kind of episode. Maybe she was a neighbor in distress. All of those things were possible, but her voice had no fear in it, no urgency, no emotion at all. It was the voice of someone reading a sentence from a card. I stayed quiet. She knocked 3 more times. Then she said, "You left something at my door." I had not left anything at anyone's door. I barely knew my neighbors. I kept to myself. "I think it belongs to you," she said. Still that flat voice, still completely still in the hallway. I pulled out my phone and called the building's after-hours line. The phone rang 4 times and went to a recording. I hung up and called again. Same thing. I looked through the peephole again. She was closer, not dramatically closer. Not pressed against the door, but she had moved forward maybe 2 feet since the last time I looked, and I had not heard a single step. That's when I felt it, that specific animal feeling, the one that lives at the bottom of your chest and doesn't respond to logic. My body had decided something before my mind caught up. I backed away from the door slowly and went into my bedroom. I locked that door too. I sat on the floor against the bed with my phone in my hand and waited. She knocked 2 more times over the next 20 minutes. Same pattern, same calm. Then it stopped. I didn't sleep. When the sun came up, I opened my front door and looked into the hallway. Nothing. No one. The yellow light humming the way it always did. But on the floor in front of my door was a single photograph, face down. I picked it up. It was a photo of me, taken from outside, through my apartment window. Taken at night, from the angle of it, from below, maybe from the street. I was sitting at my kitchen table with a mug in my hand. I was looking at my phone. I had no idea the photo had been taken. On the back of it, in small, neat handwriting, were the words, "I told you, you left something." I still don't know who she was. I moved out 6 weeks later, and sometimes, in a new city, in a new place, I think about the way she said, "I know you can see me." Not angry, not threatening, just certain, like she had been watching long enough to know exactly what I do when someone knocks. Incident 2. The night shift. The building I worked in had 32 floors, and at 11 p.m. it became the loneliest place on earth. I was a security guard. Night shift. The kind of job that sounds easy until you're actually doing it. You sit at a desk in the lobby, you watch the monitors, you do a sweep every 2 hours, and you try not to let your mind go to strange places when the only sounds are the hum of the HVAC system and the occasional elevator moving on its own between floors. Elevators do that, by the way. In older buildings especially, they move without being called. Something to do with the programming resetting or responding to pressure differences. The first few weeks, it unnerved me. After a while, I stopped noticing. I was 8 months into that job when it happened. It was a Tuesday, or technically a Wednesday, 1:15 in the morning. I was doing my second sweep of the building, starting from the top floor and working my way down the way I always did. Flashlight, key ring, radio on my hip. The floors were dark except for the emergency lighting along the baseboards, that orangish glow that makes everything look like the end of something. Floor 22 was where the legal firm was. Big, open-plan office, rows of desks, glass-walled conference rooms, a small kitchen area near the elevators. I had been through it hundreds of times. I knew every shadow in that room. I pushed through the door from the stairwell and swept my flashlight across the space. Everything was still. I started walking, and then I heard it from behind one of the closed conference room doors. A knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks from the inside. I stopped. I told myself it was the building settling. Pipes, the structure adjusting to the temperature drop outside. I had heard strange sounds on every floor at some point. There's always an explanation. I kept telling myself that. But then it happened again. 3 knocks. The same door. The same rhythm. I walked toward it slowly. Conference room B. Glass walls with those frosted privacy panels below the midpoint. I could see the upper portion through the clear glass. The room was dark. No silhouette. Nothing visible. I knocked back. 2 knocks. Silence. I tried the handle. Locked. I found the key on my ring, unlocked it, and pushed the door open. Empty. Long conference table, 8 chairs, all pushed in. A whiteboard with something written on it that I couldn't read in the dark. I swept the flashlight around. Nothing. I locked it again and continued my sweep. I was at the elevator waiting to go down when I heard it again. The same door. Conference room B. 3 knocks. From inside, I didn't go back. I radioed the lobby desk. Nobody was there, of course. I was the only guard on shift. I radioed the supervisor's cell. No answer. I wrote it in the log as a possible structural noise and went downstairs. At 4:30 in the morning, I reviewed the camera footage for floor 22. The conference rooms weren't individually wired, but there was a wide angle mounted above the elevator bay covering most of the open floor. I scrubbed back to 1:15. I watched myself come through the stairwell door, walk toward the conference room, stand there for a moment, walk away, come back, use the key, open the door, look inside, lock it again. Then I watched myself walk toward the elevator, and then I saw it. On the camera feed, just before I had turned to walk away the second time, the conference room door opened from the inside, slowly, about 4 inches. Then it stopped. Then it closed again, quietly, like someone had just wanted to see where I was going. I had not seen it happen. I had been facing the elevator with my back to the room. I quit that job 3 weeks later. I told the staffing agency it was personal reasons. I never told them about the footage. I thought about deleting it, but I left it there on the hard drive because I didn't want to be the only person who knew what was on it. Whoever or whatever knocked on that door from inside a locked, empty conference room in the middle of the night, they were quiet enough and patient enough to wait until my back was turned before they opened it. That's the part I can't stop thinking about. Not that something was in there, but that it waited. Incident 3, mile marker 74. My sister and I were driving back from our grandmother's house in rural Tennessee. It was a trip we had made a dozen times. 12 hours, mostly highway, flat land, the same gas stations every 100 miles or so. We knew the route. We had done it since we were teenagers. We made a mistake that night. We pushed too late into the drive instead of stopping earlier. By the time we decided to pull off, it was past midnight, and we were in a stretch of highway where the exits were sparse. We found a motel off exit 74, one of those old roadside places with the exterior corridors, 2 floors, an ice machine that rattled, and a parking lot that was half empty. The woman at the desk was friendly enough. She gave us room 112, ground floor, end of the corridor. She said it was quieter down there. The room was small but clean. 2 beds, a bathroom with yellow tile, a window unit air conditioner that sounded like a tired engine. My sister took the bed nearest the bathroom and fell asleep almost immediately. She has always been able to do that, drop into sleep like falling off a curb. I could not. I lay there watching the shadows on the ceiling, listening to the AC unit cycle, and trying to let my mind go quiet. It wouldn't. That happens to me on the road. Something about being in a room I don't know keeps part of me alert. It was around 2:30 when the knocking started. Our door. Room 112. 3 knocks, clear and close. I sat up. My sister didn't stir. 3 more knocks, the same calm, unhurried rhythm. I got up and went to the door. There was a peephole. I looked through it. A man was standing in the corridor, middle-aged. He was wearing a gray jacket. He was looking directly at the peephole the way people don't look at peepholes unless they know exactly where they are. I didn't open the door. "Who is it?" I said through the door. "Wrong room," the man said. "Sorry." His voice was even, not embarrassed the way you'd expect from someone who had just knocked on the wrong door at 2:30 in the morning. Not apologetic, just even. "Okay," I said, and I waited for him to leave. He didn't leave. He was still standing there, same position, and then he said, "Is there a woman in there with you?" I did not answer. "I just need to speak with the woman," he said. I stepped away from the door and grabbed my phone. I called the front desk. It rang 6 times. No answer. I tried again. Same. I looked through the peephole again. He was closer now. He had moved forward and he was looking at the door now, not the peephole. His head was slightly tilted, like he was listening for something. My sister was still asleep. I looked around the room for something heavy. I took the iron off the shelf near the closet and held it. I know that sounds almost absurd, but it was the first solid thing I touched. I stood there for what felt like a long time, watching the gap at the bottom of the door, watching for shadows, and then his shadow disappeared. I waited 10 minutes before I looked through the peephole again. The corridor was empty. I woke my sister up. I told her what happened. She was groggy and skeptical and said it was probably exactly what it seemed. A confused guest, a drunk who knocked on the wrong door. She went back to sleep. I did not sleep. In the morning, I went to the front desk and described the man to the woman working there. She was different from the one the night before. She listened to me, and then her expression changed in a way I noticed but couldn't fully read. She said there had been an incident at the motel the previous year. She said she wasn't supposed to talk about it. I asked her what kind of incident. She said a woman had been attacked in one of the ground floor rooms, end of the corridor. She didn't say which room. She didn't have to. My sister had already pulled the car around to the front when I came outside. I got in and didn't say anything for the first hour of driving. My sister eventually asked me what was wrong. I told her the man at the door had said he needed to speak with the woman. She looked at me. "He said a woman?" she said. "Yeah." "How would he know there was a woman in the room?" she said. "You never answered him about that." I had not thought about that until she said it. It was a motel. No names. No identification at check-in beyond a card number. The woman at the desk who had given us our room had gone home hours before he knocked. There was no reason he should have known, and yet somehow he did. Incident 4. Something about the neighbor. I want to start this by saying that what made it so disturbing was not what happened all at once. It was what I realized over time, looking back, connecting pieces that I had seen separately and told myself meant nothing. That's usually how the worst things work. His name was Gerald. He lived in the apartment directly across the hall from mine in a building in Cincinnati. I had lived there for 2 years before he moved in. He was quiet, polite in that careful, minimal way that some people are. We would nod in the hallway, sometimes a quick word about the weather or the elevator being slow, nothing more than that. He had a gray car. He worked some kind of daytime schedule. He had no visitors that I ever saw. Normal, I thought, unremarkable. The first thing I noticed, and dismissed, was the smell. A faint chemical smell in the hallway near his door. Not strong, not alarming. I thought he was cleaning a lot. Some people are like that. I mentioned it once to the building manager and she said she would look into it. She apparently knocked and he said he had been refinishing a piece of furniture. She accepted that. So did I. The second thing I noticed was that he knew my schedule. Not in an obvious way. Not in a way I could point to and say, that is suspicious. But there were moments. The elevator door opening just as I arrived at the lobby and him already inside. the laundry room being empty except for his clothes finishing in the dryer whenever I went on Sunday mornings. Small things. The kind of coincidences that stack up quietly before you look at the whole pile. Then the knocking started. It was always late, never before midnight. Always 3 knocks, maybe 4. And always, when I went to the door, nothing. The hallway empty. The yellow building light buzzing. His door closed. This happened maybe 6 or 7 times over the course of 3 weeks. I started to wonder if I was imagining it. I started to wonder if the sounds were coming from somewhere else. An upstairs neighbor. Pipes. The building. Then one night I opened the door 2 seconds after the knocking and caught him. He was walking away, already 4 steps down the hallway, moving toward his door at a pace that was a little too practiced to be casual. He turned at the sound of my door and looked at me with a perfectly neutral face. "Hey," he said. "Gerald," I said. "Were you just knocking on my door?" He paused for half a second. "No, I just got in." He went inside. I stood there. His door closed softly behind him. I bought a camera for my door the next day, one of those small, wide-angle ones that records to a cloud service. I set it up angled at my door and the hallway between our 2 apartments. For 8 days, nothing happened. On the 9th night, at 12:40 in the morning, he knocked on my door again. I watched it happen on my phone in real time. I watched him come out of his apartment, cross the hallway, knock 4 times on my door, and go back inside. Calm, deliberate, not looking around. Not like a man who thought he might get caught. Like a man who had done it many times. I didn't answer the door. The next morning, I went to the building manager with my phone and showed her the footage. She called the landlord. They eventually spoke to Gerald. What they found in the process of investigating the complaint was that Gerald had been living in that apartment building before I moved in, not in that unit, 2 floors up. He had transferred to the unit across the hall from mine about 6 months after I moved in. He had specifically requested the transfer. He had given a reason for the request. The reason he gave was that he preferred a lower floor, but when they looked at his file, they found something else. Before I had moved in, the woman who had lived in my apartment before me had also filed a complaint about someone knocking on her door at night. She had moved out shortly after. She never identified who it was. Gerald had been living in the building at that time too. I moved out within the month. I didn't speak to him again after that. I left before sunrise on a Saturday morning, the way you leave when you don't want someone to see you go. But a few weeks later, in my new place, on a Tuesday night at 12:40 in the morning, someone knocked on my door 3 times. I went cold. I looked through the peephole. I couldn't see anyone, just the empty corridor, the light humming. I checked my phone. No alerts from the new camera I had installed. Nothing triggered. I stood there for a long time with my hand near the handle, but not touching it. Then it happened again. 3 knocks, low and steady. I never found out who it was that night. Maybe it was nothing, a neighbor, a mistake, maybe. But I had learned something by then, something I didn't know before Gerald, before all of it. The knock itself is never the thing to be afraid of. It's the question of how long they were standing there before they knocked, and what they were doing while they waited.